Okay, Saberites, this is not a KR-JSJ hilt. This is the Jawas Junkyard Lost Soul, which is the Dagongara hilt from Jedi Survivor. I had to get a hold of this since this was the last run that Leon was making, and I went and bought one for myself. I don't often invest in other people's projects, but this, I couldn't turn my nose up at it. Since we got the Kesters coming out, there they are side by side. I couldn't say no to it. I definitely wanted to have one in my collection, and it's beautiful. It's very lovely. It's very solid hilt, weighs a ton. When people learned that I was going to get hold of this, they had some requests as to what I could amend or change with the plunger system and sort of the clocking of the chassis to the windows, since some people were having trouble with these freely rotating round, which you can see they do. The plungers, if they're not screwed in all the way, they turn more than usual, and when they turn as well, you don't get the full actuation, though they do allow light to shine through as well, which is a nice neat feature. But those are your switches, so you can't just use the blade behind these, because obviously you want to have these actuate an actual switch in the hilt. So there's got to be switches behind here that are lit, and one problem that people were finding is that when they were, or at least a couple of people that reached out to me, when they put their chassis in and they put their grip on and turn it up, the chassis will rotate inside, and so if they had any sort of light going in there, there's no guarantee of the orientation that it would sit in. So I had to come up with a solution to resolve that issue that they were finding. Not an issue, and more of just a nitpick. I'm not saying it's a bad hilt. I really do like this hilt. This has been a really interesting project to try and come up with an alternate chassis design to help people who reached out to me resolve what they wanted to find in a chassis solution for the hilt. So I've come up with a rather interesting design that requires the plungers to be replaced with these clear printed resin plungers. They're very simple. They're one piece, and they're designed so you can still use the spring from these if you want to. You can also try using it without the spring. I prefer using the spring myself, because if I have to undo the mechanism, the spring will also help release these. Otherwise you're relying on gravity to help you. But it just depends on how you feel the actuation is in this. So this is the top part of the chassis solution here, and it's got two of the stock MPXL switches, PCBs, that are underneath here. So as you can see, the plunger is designed so it slots in, so it will go in and then slide up, and then hopefully you can hear that clicking, and that stops the plunger from rotating. Yeah, it's keyed in. And then the idea of this is that once this is in, you wire it up so the threads are just about touching but not actually threading up at all. You put this in, get your plungers into the mechanism, into the switches by pushing down with a finger, just making sure you don't trap your finger. I almost get my middle finger seized up in there. I've got my fingers just a little bit too fat for it. But then you push that down, thread this up, and so the plunger will also stop this from dropping out. So the plunger helps keep it in position, and then you've got a lip round here that will stop it flying up. And also you've got these keyed slots. Let's bring this a little bit closer, get in your personal space. That will clock in to your chassis at whatever desired position you want, so you can't rotate it. So that will also help counteract the issue that some were finding when they're putting their chassis in. It would rotate, and then they wouldn't get the orientation of whatever's glowing inside to be where they want it to be. So let's go through this process, shall we? And hopefully when you see it, it might make more sense than me explaining it. So as the hilt comes, what I do is I put a finger down there until I can feel the plunger. If you can't feel it, because it does sit flush internally, just actuate your plunger until you can feel it, push down on it and unscrew these. Keep hold of the spring, let that drop out inside, take the spring away, put those to the side very carefully, don't lose those. You might want to keep them. I tend to keep spares of hilts like this. I keep them in the box. There we go, there's the other one, spring, and there's the little back side of it. Okay, cool. So I've got my replacement resin ones that you can put your springs onto. Now this is a this is a fiddly process, so be careful. So as I say, this is not threaded together yet, close to but not threaded together. So you're going to get this and drop this in to your hilt. I might have to get in your personal space. Rotate it until you can see. Can you see the switch PCB in there? Yeah, cool. Right. What you want to do is be able to get your new plunger in there. Now, if you're finding it's too close and it's not lining up, just pull it out a little bit, like so. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do now, grab one of these, place it in, hold it in there. This is where it gets a bit fiddly. Grab the other one with the spring, place it in there, so you don't have to use the spring if you don't want to. Place them in and then release them until you can feel them catch, and you get some tactile feedback from the switches. If you are struggling and you're worried about ripping off the switch off the PCB inside, you can also tune these resin pieces just by taking a file to the back of them. Obviously there will be inconsistencies in between hilts, but there is material. If you're finding that it's interfering and not engaging at the right distance, you can take the back of your new resin plungers and just sand the back of them a little bit to help you try and get the engagement you desire. Right now we're happy with that. We have to thread up whilst keeping your finger inside to make sure the PCB doesn't drop out, because if that drops out, these will spring out, okay, until this is done up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and catch the threads by hand, which I've got just there. And the great thing is, if you've got the chassis like this that you've installed, or even just the top part of the chamber, you can put it in there and use the top part, the key slots up here, to help thread up the internal kind of PCB holder, like so. Check your tactile feedback, which is nice. I have very minimal movement to get that tactile feedback. One thing I'll say is that the glow through on these isn't wonderful, not because of the resin, not because of the plunger, just because it's a very small hole that is only allowing the light to shine through. So it mainly just comes through the center because the whole thing's not a giant cutout, but it still glows through. So I'm getting nice tactile feedback. I'm happy that that's done up tight. And then what I'll do is I'll put this in there, flick it on. I am back. And as you can see, this is a motorized crystal chamber. If you don't want to put the motor in, just don't put it in. Just glue the crystal in place and obviously get your pixel in there first. But if you want the motor, hopefully you can see that that's rotating there. Awesome, let's get that light out of the way. So what I like to do is put this in here first. Actually no, that is incorrect. That's not what I want to do. I put the speaker spacer, which will come with your chassis print, and if you find that, because this isn't clockable, this pommel bit here, so what I do is I set it to where I want it to be, and you can set this to whatever height you want it to be by sanding the bottom of it and sliding that down to the bottom of the hilt, because that will help keep the chassis in position rather than letting it drop in and out of its position inside the hilt and losing connection, which you do not want it to lose connection. Put this in any way that you want to. Alright, and then line up the top of the chassis whichever way you want to have it orientated. So I want it to have the crystal glowing through the windows, like so. You do have the option to have a bit of chamber through the windows like so, but I want just pure crystal. Rotate this and you can see it's not rotating the chassis at all. doing a pretty good job. And then I do it up to about there, and I just double check, get that nice and tight there, and I can feel that that's pressing up against the speaker, and then we should be good to go. Now I can't remember which button does which.
Jedi Knight Dargangara.
Okay, so that's...
My name is Dargangara.
I've been going through fonts. Okay, let's go back.
Jedi Knight Dargangara.
So I always put 2 fonts. If there's a motorized sound font in here, I always do an additional sound font config for the sound font that turns the motor off entirely. So you can see here, well, I hope you'll see that the crystal is turning inside of there. Both my switches are glowing. And then my next sound font,
Jedi Knight Dargangara.
the exact same sound font, but the motor will not be turning. Completely static on the crystal.
My name is Dargangara.
Next one will be a completely static crystal.
My name is Dargangara.
If you can see that at all, I don't know. So this is a lovely hilt. Really nice, feels really good in hand, it's very hefty. Yeah, quite a big fan of it. So I've loaded this up with sound fonts by Jesse at Kyberphonic. All of the Survivor sound fonts that aren't actually Cal Kestis's.
Centauri.
And they sound really good. And both of these hilts, these sound fonts sound amazing. So if you haven't got the additional characters from the Survivor game yet, go to Jesse's website and purchase these sound fonts. They're absolutely awesome. Some of the hums on these are amazing.
Centauri. Ninth sister.
This is great. The hum on this. Sounds so good.
Ninth sister. Master Seer Junda. Master Seer Lord Vader.
And there we go. So, and then to get the chassis out, just unscrew your grip. Obviously there's no clocking for this as well, it just relies on the O-ring and compression, so you have to set that speaker spacer as you desire by filing it in accordance to how you want the pommel to be set as well. There we go. You see how that came out in the orientation that we left it in as well. So that's it. Nice and easy. And as I say, if you don't want the motor, you can always just program it to not have the motor turning, or don't have to put the motor in at all, just glue your crystal into place. And there you go. Right, great hilt. And I've come up with a pretty neat solution for what some people were looking for in terms of the plunger and chassis clocking. There we go guys, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.